Primetime football is coming to Houston. How will the Texans fare this Sunday night? What color will Caleb Williams paint his nails? All that and more on this edition of the Bullpen.
To throw the punches off. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Turned down for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to the Bullpen. Don't ask us how many times it took for me to say that without Tom laughing, because you don't want to know. I am James Roy, and as always with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm excited. My favorite football team leads their division in a division that no one else won in, and we got primetime football.
There's no better feeling going into the week. I guess the only thing is that when you have this Sunday night thing, you know, you watch everyone else play, there's so many results, and then you're sitting there, you're just like, man, I can't wait for my team to play. I can't wait for my team to play. And it's just kind of like a waiting game. Although I'll tell you this, I'm going to be waiting in style. The Astros are in Anaheim on Sunday, so I will be at the Astros-Angels game, taking in some fine Astros baseball against a not very good baseball team, and hopeful to see a win there, and then from there go straight to the house to catch this Texans Sunday night football game. So I'm pretty hype about that. But let's get started. But before we do, let's briefly go over the list of things we have to say at the beginning of the episode so that you guys know things about what we're doing. So let's do it. Locker is an app that does fantasy football. It's like predictive sports trivia. I think it's a really cool format, and it starts this week. If you want to join a Texan-centric league where we just watch Texans games and only answer questions about Texans games, then you should join the Bullpen League. If you download the Locker app and you search the Bullpen, you will find the Bullpen League. It's $25 to get in, and your deposit in the Locker app can be matched up to $100 through opening week or kickoff weekend for the app, which is this coming weekend. Just use promo code kickoff, and that will do it. The Bullpen is a Texans podcast, and if you're listening to us, you can watch us. I did work really hard on this background so that it would look good when people watch us talk about the Texans. And if you would like to listen to us, you can find us anywhere that you find your podcasts. All right, Tom, now that we did that, let's get to what we came here for, which is to talk about the Texans. Tom, how do you feel about the Texans' chances against the Bears? Just general question, just right off the bat.
Supremely confident. I really feel like the way that they were able to score points against the Tennessee Titans is not something that I think will travel very well. And, it's going to be a hostile environment. I think that NRG Stadium is going to be something else. I think this is going to be one of the most anticipated home openers in a while in Houston. And it's going to be a lot for a rookie quarterback to handle.
100%. I think that scoring offensive touchdowns is a pretty important part of winning football games, especially primetime. Do you think the NFL regrets scheduling this game for the primetime after what they saw from the Bears?
I don't, because I believe the Houston Texans are the big ticket item. Would they like the Bears to be better? Absolutely. But I think this is more to showcase the Texans, and I think a convincing, dominating win will probably do that just as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Let's do it. Let's break it down. Let's start with the Texans offense versus the Bears defense. The Texans against the Colts faced probably the most fearsome defensive front that they might face throughout the entire season, and held up. I mean, I wouldn't say it was like an out of the park performance in the trenches, but I mean, it was serviceable, and the Texans offense, moved the ball well on the ground and through the air against a team that's a lot better than the Bears are. So how do you think that CJ Stroud will look against this team? What do you think are some of the factors around him that might boost his performance?
Well, I really think that the difference in the Titans-Bears game was quarterback play. As really bad, I don't want to say really bad, but as rookie-like as Caleb Williams looked, Will Levis was incredibly bad. So if they expect to get that from CJ Stroud, I really can't see it. Will Levis was 19 of 32 for 127 yards. He threw 2 interceptions, and he lost a fumble. So when you look at that, I don't expect them to get 3 turnovers out of CJ Stroud. I could be wrong. That defense could show up and go to another gear. I think it's highly unlikely. What I think is interesting about the game that the Bears played against the Titans is that the Titans were able to run the football against the Bears. Tony Pollard went for 16 carries for 82 yards for 5 yards a carry. If Joe Mixon is going to do Joe Mixon things, I think it's going to be really hard to stop him. I think he's better than Tony Pollard. And the recipe is kind of similar to get a dub against the Bears. And I just see the Texans being able to score however they want.
I just was reminded while you were talking that Tyler Rowland, host of the Locked On Titans and Locked On NFL podcast stuff, did legitimately tweet before this game that he thought the Titans were a pass rusher away from being a legitimate contender in the AFC South and in the playoffs in general. And I still watching what Will Levis put on the field, it makes it even more like, because that's what they're away from is a solid quarterback play. And I think maybe he was a little higher on Will Levis than a lot of us are. But I mean, to speak to CJ Stroud, like you said, quarterback play is going to be the difference. And when we get to the end of this episode, when we give our predictions, like I gave a close prediction because I felt like the Colts are like, an opponent that is worthy of the Texans, I mean, I don't know, their respect. Like when you go into that and you predict the score on that one, you don't go, oh, well, it's going to be a blowout. You're like, okay, the Colts are good. But the Bears, our score predictions will probably be a little more disrespectful. And I mean, for good reason. I mean, Caleb Williams is the number 1 overall pick in the draft with what was touted as a receiving core that some people thought was better than the Texans in Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, and DJ Moore. And he threw for 93 yards. That's like against the Titans, which I mean, I guess the Titans are supposed to have a pretty good defense this year. So maybe that's more on that. But looking at this Texans offense, I think you spoke to what the most important thing is going to be, which is seeing Joe Mixon continue to create a legitimate threat in the run game that makes teams have to respect both, where teams can't just, there was points last season where it felt like teams were like, okay, well, the run game is not going to get past whatever defense we put out there. So we just have to make sure we're equipped to stop the pass. And so I think that is going to be a very vital part of this Texans offensive game plan. Do you anticipate? So last week, the tight ends didn't really get a whole lot of run. Do you think that against this Bears defense, we might see the tight ends get more work?
I mean, they certainly could. I just think it'll be a different wide receiver of the wide receiver group that'll really shine. Again, you can't ever count out either tight end, Brevin Jordan or Dalton Schultz. I mean, Cade Stover played fullback, but I think they could line him up in some tight end situation too. And all of those guys are very dependable, very reliable pass catchers. So there's definitely a scenario where they could have big games too. I just really feel like we're going to be talking about Nico, Tank, or Stephon Diggs again, and how one of them was just head and shoulders better than everyone else, and how Joe Mixon was able to dominate again.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably going to be the conversation. Now, we spoke to the differences in defensive fronts. I mean, the Bears don't have like no defense up front, but do you think that a combination of returning to NRG on top of this Bears defense might make for a significantly better showing from the offensive line all around?
I hope so. I mean, really, you feel like, or at least we did in our last show, that the turf kind of hindered the offensive line a little bit in pass protection. Obviously, NRG's home. They've got phenomenal facilities. I think that's going to be a much better environment for them to pass protect in. Obviously, you're going to have your fans, loud and proud, that kind of thing. So I just expect the entire team to ratchet up that energy just a little bit more, and you're going to see a lot of guys make some plays, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. I think the offense is equipped. If you had to pick one of the big 3 wide receivers based off what you know about the Bears and just how the game will go, which one do you think is going to be the guy? I would feel like you could pick Stephon Diggs or Nico Collins from the last game, depending on what you value more. But who do you think is going to be that guy, just if you had to guess?
Well, Calvin Ridley had the best game for the Titans. I try to use the last game as a little bit of a barometer to kind of see, okay, where are they going to target? Clearly, Nico has every advantage, in my opinion, over Calvin Ridley. I think he's a better wide receiver. So if they couldn't really contain Calvin Ridley, they're probably not going to be able to contain Nico. It'll just really just be a question of if CJ cares about making sure that target share is even, or if he's really just going to be matchup dependent. Um, I'm going to say probably every week I feel like Tank is going to have a monster game because I just can't imagine a scenario where they don't link up. Like they're really close. Before Nico took off, it was the Tank show. So I do believe at some point we're going to get a monster, ceiling game from Tank Dell, and it could be this week.
No, yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and try and approach this like World War II plane engineer. I don't know if you've heard that, and I don't know if it's the right analogy, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it where like at first when they were deciding where to make the armor better on World War II airplanes, they would like strengthen up where the ones that came back had been hit, and then they realized that the ones that came back were surviving, so they probably should just reinforce every other part of the plane. So I would say the Titans are a plane that didn't make it. They didn't win the game. They didn't look very good. So I don't know if I look at what they did and go, oh, that's what would be effective or what I'd expect. So I'll reverse engineer it and I'll go with Tank and Diggs as my guys that I think have the highest likelihood of going off, simply because if we look at what the Titans did with Calvin Ridley, that's their wide receiver one, their outside guy. I mean, I think that Nico's still going to eat. I'm not trying to say that Nico's not, but if I'm looking at the guy who's going to step into the category of wide receiver who's on pace for 1,000 yards on the season, I'm probably going with Tank. I think that Tank is well equipped to get around whatever Chicago's doing, and is I don't want to say the opposite of what Nico is, but is a very different skill set from what Nico did, and also does what Nico does somewhat with the deep ball. But so that's what I'm going to try and do. I don't know if I used the analogy properly, but that is what I would expect. Let's talk about how this Texans defense is going to, I don't want to say feast, but I think that this Texans defense is set up to maybe show out in a different way in this game. You could attribute Caleb Williams' stat line against the Titans to the Titans defense legitimately just getting a lot better. And this is a game that the Titans would probably win if Will Levis was a better quarterback and if the Bears didn't put up so many points without having their offense score. I don't anticipate that the Bears offense will suddenly start scoring against the Texans defense. But what do you think is the most concerning aspect of the Texans defense that could potentially leak that first score offensively for the Bears?
It's got to be, for me, probably the linebacking core. I really feel like the secondary we talked about, didn't have the best game. And I expect them to rebound. I expect them to, like you said, kind of feast on the fact that you've got a young quarterback that maybe has a little bit of tunnel vision. He went to Keenan Allen 11 times. So if he's going to force the ball to Keenan Allen and Derek Stingley Jr. is going to be there, I got to feel like Stingley's going to win that matchup at some point. The next secondly highest target dude was DJ Moore, which is kind of the deep threat a little bit. So maybe Bullock gets into the act again, that kind of thing. The one thing that I think about when I think about the Bears is DeAndre Swift is their number one running back. And I think when used properly, he's a really good running back. He's been, on some fantasy teams that I've won leagues with. So I think the talent is there. I just wonder if maybe they got behind and then couldn't go to him and then kind of got ahead and then got back to him. So DeAndre Swift is a guy that you can use in the pass game and run it. And much like Jonathan Taylor, I think if he gets going, they were able to do something with Jonathan Taylor. But I thought my feeling going into that game was that Jonathan Taylor was going to be able to eat. So I kind of feel like DeAndre Swift could have a good game for them.
I agree, and DeAndre Swift is the kind of player who I definitely I liked what he did, and then I drafted him one year in fantasy, and it was the year that he didn't do anything. So like I'm like mixed feelings on him now. but there's still that part of me that's like DeAndre Swift has done it, so I think he can do it. And if there was ever a group that needs to be present to make sure that doesn't happen, it's definitely the linebacker group. I would say, we have I mean the interior defensive line 8, right? When the task was drive Anthony Richardson inside and see if you can either make him run or sack him. So I think that I'm interested to see how this interior defensive line performs when the task is back to the edges, get out there and get in there and rush the passer. Interior defensive line, make sure you don't let anything in out from in front of you and get around you. Fill your gap and maybe get in there and make a sack. So I'm interested to see that. I wouldn't say that's necessarily what I think is the most likely weakness. You already stole my answer, which was linebacker. I think that the secondary is going to be able to turn it around, and realistically, linebacker is still. I don't think one performance that was pretty solid is enough to make me feel less uneasy about the fact that Christian Harris isn't on the field. But we'll see. I mean, could be okay. But let's talk about Caleb Williams briefly. I need to know, Tom. So in his first game, orange nails. Do you think that he sticks with that theme? Do you think that maybe he tries to steal the Texans' thunder on whiteout night and paints his nails white? I know you really care about this kind of stuff, so I'm waiting with bated breath to see what you have to say about it.
I think it's the most ridiculous thing we've ever discussed on a podcast ever. The first time he ran that by me, I was just like, "What? What are we even talking about here? Painted nails? Oh my god! Not where I thought this thing would go, but here we are." Yeah, he can paint them rainbow for all I care. It's not going to help him. I don't think it's going to yield better results by the different color. I think he needs to do stuff with his head and his hands more than his fingernails.
Well, here's what I'm wondering is how does the weight of the nail polish affect ball flight? Do you think that it affects the angle of release on his arm? I mean, do you, I'm trying to really analyze it. I'm wondering if it's therapeutic, right? I'm wondering if he sits there pregame and is painting his nails and is like, wow, this is really relaxing me. Cause I'm trying to come up with the reason outside of oh yeah, this is mean. I think he's spoken to it and it means something to him. And a lot of people were mad about it at first because he would paint them certain colors and then he'd write F you to the team that he was playing against. I think that's the first time it surfaced was when SC was playing Utah. But yeah, I feel like we've talked about the color of Caleb Williams' nails probably longer than we should have. But since I thought it was funny to say it at the entrance to the podcast, I thought we might as well actually talk about it. Now, last week we talked about how the Texans did give up a blocked punt, did have that special team snafu. And one of the ways that the Bears scored their points last week was through a blocked punt. Do you think that the Texans are looking at that and maybe making some adjustments based on that? Do you think that regardless of how the Bears did last week, they were always going to address that? How do you feel about it?
I think Frank Roth's a really good coach. And I really think that this will absolutely be a talking point. They'll absolutely look at what the Bears were able to do to the Titans, and I'm glad it happened to them and not to the Texans because I think they'll be prepared for the possibility that they send an extra guy, the possibility they try to do something on special teams to make a play, whether it's returning a kick or blocking a punt. So that seems like the most favorable way for the Bears to get something done, and I think that the Texans will be focused in on that a little bit more than they would if it didn't happen the week prior. So when I look at this game, I can't see a scenario where they're not prepared for whatever the Bears are going to try to do to them.
Yeah, I obviously we're both veterans from very different parts of the military. You Air Force, me Navy. And in the particular part of the Navy I'm in, there's Admiral Rickover, one of the more influential figures in my part of the Navy, and he has a quote that says, you should learn. The gist of it, this is a paraphrase, but you should learn from other people's failures because you're not going to live long enough to make every mistake on your own. It'd be a shame if the Texans went into this and were like, we didn't even look at what the Bears and the Titans did. We're playing the Bears. We're the Texans. We're really good, and we shouldn't even care about that. So I trust that someone in the Texans building was like, hey, the Bears blocked a punt last week. It's actually former Texan Jonathan Owens that returned it for the touchdown. Simone Biles' husband, for those of you who care to know. And
NFL Network introduced him that way. It was a gold medal play. They leaned hard into the Simone Biles thing.
Good grief. But I think the Texans will be set from there. So let's talk about our score predictions. Let's just get into that and see what happens on the field when it happens. So I want you to start. I'm interested to see, because you said going into the Colts game that the Texans were going to win 27-10. So I can't even begin to imagine what you think the score of this game is going to be. I'm interested to see.
30-6. That's where I'm at.
So is that 6 points scored by way of an offensive touchdown and a missed extra point, or 2 field goals?
2 field goals. That's all I'm giving them.
What's the record for the longest amount of time a team has gone without scoring an offensive touchdown in a season? I'm gonna have to look that up, because
they're gonna flirt with it if my prediction is right, because I just don't see a scenario where they're gonna be able to generate enough offense to beat the Texans. The Texans aren't gonna beat themselves. I don't think they're gonna turn the ball over and an amazing amount of time to give positive field to the Bears, and the Bears are gonna have to march down the field. And we saw Caleb Williams complete less or right at 50%, maybe a hair less than 50%. I just don't think that's enough.
It was just a hair less. It was 14-29. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I'm gonna, for the sake of different opinions, I'm gonna go ahead and give this. I was thinking it through before you finished, and I think I've come to my conclusion. I'm gonna give them a touchdown. I'm not sure. I don't really care how they scored it, but I'll go 28-13. I think that they get those 2 field goals. I think that late in garbage time that the Bears put up a touchdown and people are like, oh no, this could get competitive, but it's like, 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and it would take a far better team than the Bears are to make that comeback. And with that, usually storybook ending would involve some sort of creative and cool play that separates it. But since this game was never really close, I guess I could describe the last touchdown the Texans score or one of them. We'll go with the opening drive. The Texans are going to receive because the Bears are going to win the toss, and they're going to defer like any smart team should. They may not be good, but they're smart. And the Texans will just take the ball, and they'll start to march. It'll be the Joe Mixon show. Hand the ball to him a few times, get towards the middle of the field, and then C.J. Stroud will drop back and catch Tank Dell in the middle of the field, similar to the play against the Jaguars last year in Jacksonville. That wasn't a touchdown, but in this case, it would be a touchdown, where he hits him really deep down the middle. And then, that's what I've got. I mean, it's really hard to have like a long and intricate storybook ending when it's not the ending, and it's not really a storybook. It's just
when it's over before the end.
It's just me living my dream of, describing drives and them happening as I've described them. So I wouldn't go put any money on that, but I was right that Stephon Diggs scored the last touchdown the Texans scored yesterday, or I guess last week, Sunday. In case you guys didn't know, we're recording this on Sunday night, so the magic is gone, the mystery is done.
We looked out behind the curtain.
You've taken a peek behind the curtain and you've seen the Wizard of Oz is not a wizard. So, well, Tom, do you have anything to add to that before we kind of bring this thing to a close?
I think it's the other way around. I don't think it'll be the Mixon show early at all. I think C.J. Stroud will come out. He'll go 6 for 7, march right down the field. They'll load the box up, and he'll just pepper all these other receivers. He'll end up hitting. Like I do agree with Tank getting a touchdown. I think he gets Tank into the box. But, he's just going to have everybody involved, walk them down, and then they're just not going to look back from that. I imagine there'll be some turnovers for the Texans. I really don't see Caleb Williams being able to pick this defense apart. I really think he's going to struggle, and maybe we get the edge rush that you're after. While I do believe Caleb Williams likes to get out of the box and run a little bit, I don't think he's the athlete that Anthony Richardson is. So I do believe Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson could possibly each have a sack in this game. It just seems like it's going to be a really well coached, full, all three phases. I just feel like Texans are going to run away and hide.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's important to talk about how the Bears reviewed this offseason. And I think I want to call it the Texans effect. I mean, it's commonplace when a team, it's not really commonplace because it's not commonplace to do what the Texans did. But when a team has a perceived turnaround, usually it doesn't result in the playoffs like the Texans did. But, in the past, that happens. And then the team that picks number one overall or that has a really good offseason, they're like, oh, they could be the next Texans. And I saw a few too many people say that the Bears could be the next Texans. And I need it to be known that, like, outside of like a receiving core that's kind of good, I'm not going to take anything away from that. Rome Odunze, if he reaches his potential in the NFL, is a really good target. DJ Moore has been good at points in his career, and Keenan Allen is a really good wide receiver. But with Caleb Williams, who is a rookie, Caleb Williams is not going to step into the league and be CJ Stroud. And I would also look towards the end of Caleb Williams' career in college to kind of get an indicator of how things could go in the pros. That casts a lot of doubt for me on how his pro career is going to go. So I still think Caleb Williams will be pretty good in the pros. I just don't think it's going to be a day and night difference for the Bears this season to last season. As good as Ryan Poles has done putting a team together that's respectable. So that is my last comments on this game before we get into it. We'll see y'all next week after the game to talk about it. Hopefully on a Victory Monday edition of the Bullpen podcast. But before we go, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Anything you say in the comments is really helpful. If you want to show up on Wednesdays when we do our lives and get active on that would really help us out too. We love talking to you guys. And if you want to listen, make sure you go out and subscribe to the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts so that you can listen to us on the morning commute. As always, I am James Roy, and you can find me at James Roy NFL on Twitter and at M1 Texans Fan on Instagram. Tom is at TCTom1 on Instagram and at Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we have been the Bullpen. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.
Take the handoff. Stroud looking. Stroud. End zone.